Navigating Uncertainty, a special series inside Suicide Zen Forgiveness podcast. This is a real time series that will be airing at intervals over the next year. Right now, life feels so confusing and overwhelming and even unpredictable. There seems to be chaos everywhere. This series is here to help. We're bringing you real-time insights, expert advice, and raw, honest conversations to help you navigate these challenging times. We're going to share practical tools, expert perspectives, and have meaningful discussions. Whether you're searching for clarity, connection, or just a few moments of peace, you'll find something here. Not everybody's going to agree with everything shared in this series, and that will include some of our guests. And that's okay. We want to equip you with a useful virtual toolbox that's available to you whenever you need it. We're here to explore all sides of the uncertainty together. So let's get on with the show. Hello, it's so good to be back. I'm Elaine Lindsay, as we said, and today we are working in the series Navigating Uncertainty. This is our series inside the Suicide Zen Forgiveness podcast. It's a real-time series and it's going to air at intervals over the next year. It'll depend on how things shake out around the world. Because let's face it, folks, life feels so confusing right now. And the point of this series is to try and help. Okay, it's packed with real-time information and tips, some expert resources, and raw, honest conversations designed to guide you through these challenging times. We will have special guests like David Amerland, Mark Babbitt, Andy Grant, and my lovely guest today, AnneMoss Rogers. They're going to be sharing practical tips and truly meaningful conversations, as well as some expert resources. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or just a few moments of peace, this series has something for everyone. Now, not everybody, maybe you, will agree with everything you hear during the series, and you may not agree with some of our guests, but I want to look at all sides of the situation around the world to help us all face the uncertainty together. With that said, I would like to introduce my guest and say hello to AnneMoss Rogers. Lovely to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me. And just so everyone knows, my first name is Ann Moss. It's a Southern thing, so you have to say both words. I'm a suicide prevention speaker, mental health speaker. I speak mostly in the education space and at companies and workplaces on topics related to mental health and finding coping strategies. And of course, my niche is suicide prevention.
Thank you for that. We will make sure, along with all the rest of the information about AnneMoss, that's why I say it like that, it will be down below, as well as a link to her original bio, etc., on her previous podcast with us. So, navigating uncertainty. This is a term that I bandied about late last fall. And with everything going on in the world, there are wars happening. There is this change in the president in America. There are displaced peoples in so many different countries right now. The price of everything everywhere is going through the roof. And the fact is, unless you're sound asleep, I think everybody has some fear. Would you say?
I would. I think I've noticed a lot of anxiety, a lot of what I call catastrophe. And I think that's an important subject for us to tackle. And I think it's more important than ever to learn to take that deep breath, take that pause, and stay in the present and not start to project, because that's where we can really get chaotic within ourselves. Because there's all this chaos and instability out here, and we tend to want to just throw up our hands and go, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm frozen, and I can't do anything. And that's not true, but you can acknowledge and sit with that feeling.
There, and that's a really good point because one of the things I think that get us into the most trouble is running away from our feelings. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
can, yeah, I can honestly say I am the queen of running away. I'm getting better now. I say in my old age, I will actually sit and allow the feeling to what I call flow and go, because that's really where we're at our optimum.
That feeling has a name. And in DBT, if you look at dialectical behavioral therapy skills, DBT skills, one of them is called ride the wave. And if you're in that sort of moment of catastrophizing, first thing you have to do, take a deep breath and learn to take that pause. And then you just have to go with the feeling, diving into it, allowing it to happen and sit with it, because the intensity of that feeling will last 60 to 90 seconds. And a lot of people are like, oh, it lasts much longer. If that is the case, you're sitting with it and then you're refiring that emotion because you're not allowing it to lift and then distracting yourself with a healthy coping strategy. And that's the key. You sit with it, it will eventually lift 60 to 90 seconds. And that's when you plan, I'm going to go take a walk, I'm going to go get in the shower, I'm going to dance to music, I'm going to read, I'm going to write, whatever your thing is. And you should have a toolbox, because not every, if you only have one, then it's
Yeah.
not appropriate. I was at a university, this is funny. I was in a university and I said, so what are your coping strategies? And the young men in the back, there are about four of them, of course, they throw up their hands, sex. Okay, yeah, that is a coping strategy. What else? And they're like, they're 21 years old. They're like, there is nothing else in the whole wide world. I'm like, let me give you an example. You are in the frozen food section at a grocery store, and suddenly you have a panic attack. Is that particular coping strategy available to you right at that moment without getting arrested?
There's a good point there. Yeah.
So that's why you should have several. And a healthy coping strategy, and let's define that,
Yeah.
is one that long term use of won't cause you problems. So if you're in, like you mentioned, avoiding. So a lot of people want to numb it with drugs and alcohol, or they want to eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream, or they want to go do retail therapy. All those, if you do them over time, the retail therapy, if you did that every time you were anxious, you're not going to have enough to pay your electric bill, right? You eat too much ice cream, you're going to end up gaining too much weight. You're going to be unhappy with yourself. Drugs and alcohol, that can lead to addiction and dependence. So you want to pick ones: walking, running, writing. Somebody said beekeeping. I've had people say rock climbing, listening to music,
Yeah.
writing music, playing a game, calling a
Meditation is a
friend,
good one.
meditate. It doesn't have to be quiet, but it can be.
Yeah.
Meditation is a quieter one. It works for a lot of people. And if that doesn't work for you, then you can do an active one. I like to go and do Angry Summit, which is a hill near my house. And when I walk up there, I'm barely able to breathe no matter what kind of shape I'm in because it's straight up for 2
Uh,
miles.
wow.
And I'm dying, and I'm not angry or sad. I'm
Just trying to
just
get
glad to
going.
be yeah, just glad to be alive once I get to the top. It's a mile. This one's a mile, not 2 miles.
Oh, wow. Wow, that sounds good. That's a really good point that not it doesn't have to be quiet. It doesn't have to be one way. My spiritual mentor suggests that people who have a hard time with any of their emotions get a heavy bag and put it in your basement or get a pile of pillows and do scream into a pillow, beat a heavy bag, go and get that frustration out. Again, it's a way to let it flow and go because what you said, I think, is so critically important. 60 to 90 seconds. That's all we have to get through to then be able to take ourselves somewhere else. And when we can remember that, when we can latch on to one of the tools that we've put in this virtual toolbox, 60 to 90 seconds is not that long a time. It takes a while to get to a place where you can have that kind of ingrained so you get it. And I'm going to be perfectly honest here. There are days where the 60 to 90 seconds can feel like forever,
It
and
does.
anger can make you really unattractive, and it can be very hard to get out of anger when you've
Yeah.
allowed it to just take over. But having said all that, you can choose at any moment that's enough. That choice is always ours. If you remember nothing else from what we do over this series, the bottom line is the choices are yours. Those choices for internal control, I guess is the word I'm looking for. That's your choice. We always have choice.
And the deep breath or taking a pause is really the foundation of all coping skills. So a lot of people will say it's mindfulness, but in order to do mindfulness, you have to learn to take a pause. You have to learn to stop. And that's why whether I'm talking with university, doing suicide prevention training, or I'm at a workplace, or I'm talking to a preschool group, impulse control.
Yeah.
Over and over again, praise yourself for those times where you take a deep breath and you take a pause. And at first, you won't, if you have trouble with impulse control, it's going to take you longer. So give yourself some grace if you do it 1 out of 20 times.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, yay, I did it that once. And then once you praise yourself or somebody else does, you'll start to remember it. And it takes a while before it becomes a habit. And when I lost my son to suicide, that was one of the coping strategies. I had to feel the feelings because when you sit with the feelings of instability or chaos or whatever it is, and you acknowledge them, healing starts to happen. You're building resilience. So it's not like that pain doesn't have a purpose, it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we start projecting, now I was never an avoiding person. I've always, oh, that's a problem. I'm going to dive right in.
Yeah.
I don't want to suffer any longer than I have to. So while there's nothing we can do for pain, we can lessen that suffering. And when we catastrophize, what we're doing is projecting into the future something that has never happened and we're hovering over it.
Yeah.
So let's say you predicted everything that's going on right now. Did that help you in any way? Or did pre worrying Or is it just, I told you it was going to happen?
Yeah.
If it helps you and you start to project, say, if that happens, I have this plan in place and that's what I'm going to do. And then you can put a lid on that box. And anytime you come back to that, go, I've already thought about what I'm going to do. I have a bomb shelter. I'll go in the bomb shelter and I have it all set up down there. So if that makes you feel better, then good. Because when my son was using, I used to catastrophize. Every time I got a phone call, he's in a ditch, he's dying, he's been thrown from a car. It was, I always saw him in the hospital, hooked up to me, or in a coffin.
Yeah.
And yeah, he did die by suicide eventually, but every phone call, I felt that. And then I had to finally get to a place where this is not helping me. And I'm wrung out and I can't keep going through this. I can only do so much.
You must have been exhausted.
Oh, absolutely. And it was that exhaustion that forced me to get help. And
Yeah.
I tried the therapy thing, and I think that is a really awesome solution. But what helped me was a group.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
needed to be connecting with other people who were going through this.
Mm.
I needed to see that there were some success stories. I needed to see that other people like me were going through this. And that's when I started to chill out. Oh, I am not the only
Oh my
one.
God.
There
Yeah.
are people who have it worse, and some people who don't have it as bad. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good point because therapy is great and groups are great. And those of us who avoid, it's funny how in studies and things that kept my attention, good things, I'm get ahead. Let's go, let's do it, let's whatever. But in hindsight, as a child, I grew up in a home that was absolute chaos and not chaos, not a whole bunch of stuff going on in a bad way. But we came to this country where I live with my mom, my dad, my grandmother, and my aunt. And my aunt was very ill. My aunt had a heart condition, and she very shortly after that had breast cancer, and she went through a ton of different things. When we were living in the same city, we would live together. So it meant we were right in the thick of it, and we were part of her being taken to the hospital. And it became such a regular occurrence. The state was always heightened. My mother was always on like tenterhooks. She was always waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And we moved away 5 hours away when I was 5. And so it became this constant. Every time the phone rang, I would hold my breath because I was waiting for my mother to react. And it often meant that we would have to get in the car and drive for 5 hours right away, or my father and I would go. And it just became this constant cycle. And that became my go to for
Yeah.
anything untoward, anything I didn't want to feel. Then I just basically left this building, this body I'm in. It was just okay, I'm out of here. And it's funny how in hindsight we find these things out. But back in the day when Andrea, my friend, died, that was 1972. And there were no Samaritans or Trevor Project or any of the, there wasn't even 911 back then. There was nothing that was in place to explain to us or to give us an outlet, or even like us right here, to give you any kind of tools that you could use.
Or
All you
anybody that would talk about it or talk to
oh my
you
God,
about
yeah.
it.
Okay, yeah, you definitely didn't talk about it. And I had the added pressure of being Catholic, going to a parochial school, and my friend was Jewish. there was no way I could say anything, any of us at school, because that was the cardinal sin in Catholicism.
Yeah.
And at the time in this country, it was still a crime.
Oh, yeah.
Attempted
In
I
some states, here in the United States, it's still on the books, even if it's
in
not.
Virginia, yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't have a statute attached, and we finally got it through,
Oh,
and
good.
our governor vetoed it after the first time we ever got it through. And it was
Wow.
like, after 10 years, we
Uh,
got bigger fish to fry. We'll just leave it alone for now.
I think that's a really good idea, but you can understand that that kind of avoidance and that kind of back then, no one wanted to acknowledge that there was a suicide in their family.
Oh,
No one
no.
no one wanted
It was a shame.
yeah, and it was taboo, like mental health, like anything back then. There was so much that was taboo. It made it really hard, and I have to say we have made good strides, but they're not good enough.
No.
In order to handle, especially where we are right now in the world, and this is the whole world is having such a hard time with what's going on around us. At the end of 2024, we had lost well over 1 million people. The estimate for 2024 was 800,000 people in the world to die by suicide. And we went over that by 25%. That
Sad.
is absolutely, I'm sorry, but it's obscene for us to lose that many people. We can make a difference. And my thing is about step up to listen. That's letting people know that they're seen and they're heard and listening to people. And it's not just the people that are attached to you. Sometimes I ask if everybody take one person a month and just give them 10 minutes. I don't want you to fix anything. I don't want you to give them any kind of solutions. I just want you to listen because that's really what we want. We want
Oh, yeah.
someone to listen to us.
To hear us. And I just wrote an article for Dr. Stacy Friedenthal's site about toxic positivity doesn't fix depression or suicidal thoughts. Because people think that when somebody says, I'm so ugly, they naturally want to say, no, you're not. And I get that.
Yeah,
I want to say it too. I've learned not to, and I've
yeah.
learned to say instead, what makes you think
Mm,
that you're so ugly? Now, if it's so uncomfortable for you, later in that conversation, you can just say, for the record, I understand that you feel that way. I don't see you that way, and I just want you to know that I don't. It's just important to me. But we want to focus on them
yes.
and how they feel. So they can talk. If you ask them open-ended questions, then they think about, why do I feel that way? And then they start talking. So all this mumbo jumbo has taken up a lot of brain real estate, right?
Yeah,
And once they start talking, it no longer is. So it's freeing up space in that person's head. So you think this listening stuff, I'm not doing anything. You are. Don't undervalue the value of allowing another person to feel heard because it does free up all that space in their head. And when we're listening, we're nodding, we're leaning in, and we may only occasionally be asking open ended questions or asking for clarification. Keep the focus on them. So you don't want to say, what would your sister think if you killed yourself? That's introducing shame,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Instead, you want to say something like, a minute ago, you mentioned your sister Bridget. Tell me about her. What does she mean to you? How does she fit into all this? And you're just asking a question, but you don't want to introduce something or someone they have not already mentioned.
Yes. Yes.
So the thing is about listening, once you listen long enough, you can start to ask the right questions and lead it to remind them who's in their life.
Oh, that's such
And
a good point.
and all this instability, all this chaos is going to negatively affect those who are vulnerable. So we want to model also finding that one stable part of our own lives and focusing on that. There's a lot of stuff out there that's happening. What can I do to, in my corner of the world, to help? I'm not helpless. Let me identify that. And let me also focus on what I do have that's stable. I have a stable family and marriage. And right now, my house is stable and where I have to live. Now, not everybody can say that, but right now that's my stability thing. If you're unhoused, it may be my stability thing right now is I have a toothbrush. I managed
Yeah.
to get one. It may be just a real little thing, but just think of one thing that's stable that you're grateful to have that maybe you worked for that just before would have been something you would have completely taken for granted.
Granted. Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good point, and part of the listening, for me is you are validating that person.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have the wherewithal to say much and you don't think you have the right questions, just validating that other human is so incredibly important. And I want to add one thing to that, especially because you're absolutely right with all the chaos and everything that's going on. Uh, Another friend of ours talked about saying people's name. When you're in a restaurant, when you're in the grocery store, somebody's got a name tag on, just take that extra second and use their name.
I do that.
I am the first one in a restaurant to complain if the food is bad or if the service is bad. But I'm also the first one to give applause for good service and good food because when you tell them if something isn't right, how else can people fix it unless they know something wasn't right? You can't fix what you're not aware of. It has
Right.
to be done in a polite way, and that's important. But it's all those other times that people don't think to say, our server was Marianne. I just wanted to say how incredibly attentive she was. Or we were in a restaurant and we had our grandkids, and one of our grandkids has some dietary concerns, and it's difficult for him in a number of places. And this server was so wonderful in finding things that she could make sure that he got something. Because there's nothing worse when you're a young kid than having to sit and watch everybody else eat. And a lot of restaurants don't
That's
have
me.
that.
I have a lot of dietary
Yeah.
issues, so I'm totally getting where you're coming from.
Yeah, and it was quite wonderful. And a couple of years ago, when we first got our Chihuahua, there's a lot of Amazon trucks and FedEx and what have you around here. And we would keep her out on the front porch because she wouldn't let you put on a harness or a collar or anything like that. And you couldn't get near her. So we were trying to give her some kind of life. And the mailman and the FedEx people would go by and she'd bark like a fool. And this one girl from FedEx spent over 10 minutes sitting on the step with this little dog barking in her face just to try and give her a treat. 2 weeks later, She was back at the neighbors. She wasn't even at our house. And she came again and spent the time to give my dog a treat.
Oh,
Okay. And she's a Chihuahua. She's a barker. She, didn't have a good life before we got her. And I actually phoned FedEx and said, I don't know if this meets your standards. I just want you to know this lady, and I think her name was Janet, is an absolute gem and has gone out of her way, not once, but twice, to be kind to our dog. I will now make it a point. If I'm sending anything, I'm sending it FedEx.
hmm
So they win, but they wouldn't know that and they wouldn't be able to appreciate Janet if we hadn't said something.
I think really acts of kindness are a way to
Yeah.
feel better yourself. That's a
Yeah.
self-care step right there. I know I did that, excuse me, it just after my son's death, I had to do that to it, giving back really helps us heal.
It does. It really does. My my best friend, her name was Jackie, and she died in 2010. She had brain cancer. In the last 2 years, just before she got the cancer, we would go to the gym or we'd go swimming or we'd go every couple of days and we would stop at Tim Hortons. And our favorite thing was to pay for the people behind us and then take off. Okay. We didn't even stay to smile or we'd pay for
Yeah.
the people behind us. And it became such an important part of our routine that when she died, my spiritual advisor sent me $100 gift card for Tim Hortons
Oh,
so I could carry on the tradition. Her name is Patricia Wall.
that's so
And
nice.
I carried it on. Lots of people do it, but it is a self care thing. And a couple years later, my son came running into my house. I'd asked him to stop and get a coffee. It sounds like I go there a lot. I really don't. But I said, yeah, stop and grab me a coffee before you come over. And he came in the house. He said, oh my God, mom, that was so cool. Somebody paid for your coffee. It was like, oh, wow, that's so
Oh,
cool. It's gone full circle.
yeah, pay it
And
forward.
absolutely. And the upshot of all that was I just wanted to do it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be addictive, but in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll start wrapping up here. We've done a lot with the toolbox. Are there other things? I know you said mindfulness and pausing, I think is so critical. Taking those deep breaths. My spiritual advisor called it breathing slow and low. And that actually centers you. It calms everything in your body, which is a useful little tool to have in the box no matter where you are. And that you're right, that without that pause, you're not going to get to anything else.
Yeah, that all the other skills depend on you being able to take that pause. And I think listen more and lecture less.
Oh, that's so good.
I just keep it short and simple. Listen more and like that. Parents can usually remember that really well. Listen more and lecture less.
And lecture. Oh, that is so good. And I don't know who said it, but we the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's a
One
reason
mouth,
for that.
yeah. Right.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your day to give us some wonderful tips and things we can put in this toolbox for life, which is really what we're advocating for here. It's so important that we take care of ourselves because that's the only way that we can be we can take care of other people.
Sure.
And I thank you from the very bottom of my heart for all that you do, Ann Moss.
Well, thank you, Elaine.
I love you big time, big time.
Yeah.
And
LinkedIn friends.
we are. And I think it's really important going forward that we let people know, as horrid as things can get, this too shall pass.
It will, and you are not helpless. Do what you can in your corner of the world. It's all right to freeze for a minute, but don't freeze permanently.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not a popsicle. I have to put my bent little humor in there somewhere. This has been Navigating Uncertainty, our series inside Suicide Zen Forgiveness. I thank you all for being with us. I thank AnneMoss Rogers, our lovely guest, for everything she's brought to the table today. And once again, just give someone your ear for 10 minutes, one person a month. That's all I ask. Just listen. Ann Moss gave you some really good tips for questions you can ask at the appropriate time. And as she said, always focus on that other person. With that said, I'm going to say make the very most of your today every day. And we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for being here for another inspiring episode of Suicide Zen Forgiveness. We appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe and download on your favorite service and check out SZF's YouTube channel or Facebook community. If you have the chance to leave a 5-star rating or review, it'd be greatly appreciated. Please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from the hope and inspiration from our guests. Suicide Zen Forgiveness was brought to you by the following sponsors: Truel Social Media, the digital integration specialists. Let them get you rocking page 1 in the search results. Canada's keynote humorist Judy Croon, motivational speaker, comedian, author, and stand-up coach at Second City. Judy has been involved for over a decade in the City Street Outreach Program in Toronto.
The ultimate podcasting pack. This is great for you if you're just starting your podcast or if you've been running it for a while. It's filled with tools, templates, and trainings for starting, growing, and monetizing your podcast. Get access to time-saving systems and strategies for accelerating your process at each step. Find new connections and collaborations in the uplifting podcasting community. I look forward to seeing you there.
Do you have a story to share? Do you know someone you think would be a great guest? Please go to szf42.com. And for our American listeners, that's szf42.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again.